Our next conversation is going to be serious and light at the same time, because we will be talking to somebody who deals with alcohol, but also at the same time we're talking about alcohol that is illicit and leads to death and harm to humans. Ben Githua is the chairman of the Alcoholic Beverages Association of Kenya, ABAK, Abuja. How are you, Eric? Did I say Ben?
Yes, you did. You said Ben.
How did I say Ben?
You said it like that, but we can say Eric. Say Eric.
Eric.
Well done.
Yeah, I just wanted us to have one Eric in the studio. That's how.
Feeling territorial, are you?
Yeah. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Very well.
Nice to be here.
Say hi to Ndu.
Yes.
How are you?
Eric says hi.
Hi, Eric.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
We'll talk about the association, what you guys do, what you work on, and recently we've seen some statements from you regarding the proliferation of illicit brews in the country. Not a new conversation, but why do we keep having this conversation every so often? Why do we keep having so many families burying their loved ones and also people just losing their loved ones to alcoholism? That conversation comes shortly after we give you the day's proverb. City is not here, he would have given you the proverb himself. Ametuma salamu, akasema utuachie nini yake. But the proverbs this week are from Angola. It's a thing.
It's another
Yeah. The Angolan proverb for today is, in the larger affairs, the minor are forgotten.
Okay.
In the larger affairs, the minor are forgotten.
Okay. I think it's just that same concept with, the minority having their say, but do they really have their way? Because in the rules of democracy, the majority at the end of the day wins. So the minor's view could be the most important view, but at times it's not respected, it's not taken into consideration just because they didn't count as much.
It's forgotten.
Yes, it's forgotten.
Regardless of whether it's important or not.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Introduce us to the Alcoholic Beverages Association of Kenya.
Thank you. So, Eric Githua, as you said, I'm the chairperson of Alcoholic Beverages Association of Kenya. It's an association of alcohol manufacturers. So it's a unit which comprises of various companies which we've subscribed willingly to participate in. Just by way of membership, we have 7 members. So our members are Qual, Kenya Wine Agencies Limited, Kenya Breweries Limited, UDV Kenya, 2 Cousins Limited, London Distillers, Pernod Ricard, and Heineken. So we collaborate jointly on issues of such as illicit, anti-illicit issues. We collaborate on advocacy issues when engaging the government. We engage as one team. And at the end of the day, we are also very keen at responsible sale and marketing of alcohol. So we have even a code of conduct which all of us as members have subscribed to ensure that we are able to responsibly sell and market the alcohol products.
What is responsibly selling alcohol?
Responsible selling entails various aspects. For example, we believe alcohol should only be accessible to adult consumers. So we will always ensure that even from the
Your
way...
belief doesn't matter. That's the law.
Actually, a lot of it is actually a lot of the law, including what we have as Alcoholics Drinks Control Act. It actually took a lot of views, the current one, what we call the Mutudo law.
Yeah.
It took a lot of views from us, the industry players. Right even before the ABAK was already there, and there was already a marketing code that we had already signed to voluntarily. Okay. So the law actually learned from the industry.
Very good.
And it's actually, for us, we are very keen at ensuring that alcohol is only accessed by the adult consumers. We are also very keen on responsible consumption from, for example, you cannot promote over drinking or binge drinking. We believe that a rightful consumer should be able to drink responsibly. We also respect the choices of those who do not choose to drink. I think drinking is a matter of choice, and we also respect them, and we are part of the community that ensures that it is respected.
Okay. So that's what we talk about it then being responsible at some point, right?
Yes.
There's been a lot. I mean, look, there's been a lot. We're looking at recent incidences. We're talking about historical incidences whereby folks get into a spot of trouble with their health when it comes to then brews or liquors or whatever that they've ingested. Where does the association play there? Because sometimes we'll be looking at traditional brews, which steps outside of your purview. Sometimes we'll be looking at, stuff that's manufactured, I don't know where, behind the tent. So where does the association play when it comes to those things in terms of regulation? And can we really have a handle on some of these other things that are happening?
Yeah, and thanks, Ndu. I think that's a very important question. It's indeed very, very sad and unfortunate. Just looking at what has happened in Kangai village, I think in Kirinyaga County, seeing 17 people die because of consumption of illicit brew it's heartbreaking. You know, those are fathers, those are mothers, those are people's children. And unfortunately, more have gone, I think some of them are even still in hospital, and some have gone blind to it. So what have we been doing as an association? First, we've been deeply concerned with the level of illicit. The first research that was done about the level of illicit was done by WHO in 2018. It was published in 2018. It indicated to us that 44% of alcohol sold in Kenya is illicit. In the WHO term, they call it unrecorded alcohol. So it means that the formal trade is actually 56%. The other day, last year, we partnered with various government agencies to also find out our new numbers, because we've seen COVID came, the level of depressed income has been there. There's always also been other factors which has led to legitimate alcohol being expensive. So when we did the research, it now indicates that 59% of what is consumed in Kenya is illicit.
59%.
59%. And it's only 41% that is the legitimate alcohol.
Okay, I know you want to, I need to just step in there to ask a question before you, so you remember that thought. But maybe we can just define what is illicit, because we tend to think that, okay, illicit is something that's put in a jerry can somewhere and then you've poured jet fuel into it, or it didn't go through the right filtration process. What is illicit alcohol?
Okay, thanks for that. We have various types of illicit. The first one is counterfeit, where right from the word go, you've interfered with somebody's intellectual property by having a brand name. Maybe you've taken their packaging and you've just distorted, you've created your own labels. And most of it, you find sometimes could be even substandard. Then there is also contraband, whereby it's especially for the imported products, where the sole reason that this good is brought into the country is for purposes of duty evasion. So that brings that element of illicit. Then there is also these other ones which are unregulated by how they are manufactured. So you'll find, for example, what we call the traditional home brews, which is manufactured by somebody at the backyard, and it's not regulated. The process is not, you won't see government officials as part of the process on the quality checks. That also forms illicit.
Okay. All right. So now going back to the 41%.
Yes.
So you have 59% of alcohol that's being consumed in the country today is illicit.
Sure.
What are the checks and controls then for this to make sure that it's either removed from the market, or at the very least that there's awareness that this is happening?
And I think first, for us, we've really tried first to collaborate with the government. There are efforts that also the government has tried to put in place from an enforcement perspective. The situation could have been worse. It's only that enforcement should come, our view is that enforcement should come at the tail end. There are other policy considerations that we need to keep in place. Also, why is it much of concern to us? If you look at it, when you are having a place where almost 3 out of 5 drinks that you have is illicit, it's a sad situation. Because that's like almost 60%. Now, apart from the social or the health issues, I think which are the most important issues affecting people who are having this consumption of illicit, there are also other things, like the government is losing a lot of revenue. From the research that we did last year, if you look at it, the level of taxes lost to the illicit world is actually about 66 billion shillings.
Per year.
Now, what will 66 billion do? 66 billion, for example, you've just seen there was an infrastructure bond for 70 billion. Probably that money was just paid. You didn't need an 18% perspective interest rate on it. I was looking at the Kenya police budget. I think it's about 104 billion. Our Kenya police would have been heavily empowered with it. If you look at the State Department for Road budget, it's about 80 billion. And these are, they're in the act in this financial year. So we would have better roads. So the government is actually losing a lot of revenue on this aspect. Now, what is our view? First, we need to understand why are people consuming illicit. I think first it's affordability. Most of these people cannot afford legitimate alcohol. The unfortunate incident, for example, in Kirinyaga, you find, if you go to that on the ground, and we've seen the reports from the ground, there was an option. There are people who consumed from the jerry cans, which was the illicit brew. There are others who are in the same bar and they consume the legitimate product. Those who consume from the jerry can are the ones who are, unfortunately, have been impacted. And why so? Because of affordability. If you look at legitimate alcohol, is very expensive in Kenya. Compared to Uganda, compared to Tanzania, you know, people who live in the border towns, they actually go to drink on the other side because alcohol is expensive. And why is it expensive? First, the taxes that have been charged on legitimate alcohol are quite high. I can just give you in terms of percentage. For an average 250 ml value product, you know, the value product is what the person who drinks illicit, when things go bad, they now down trade. So you'll find on an average about 49% of the direct cost, or if compared to an RRP, 49% actually is actually taxes, and I'm talking about excise tax and VAT on it. Then the cost of production, or the cost of the good, the actual cost is about 22%. Now the 29% is what now we call the margin of the manufacturer, the margin of the, you know, at the end of the day, there's a distributor, there's a stockist, there's a retailer, and now there are also indirect costs. There are a lot of county levies that our distributors pay, a lot of it bar owners pay. There are also national government levies. There is also corporate taxes for us manufacturers. So that's why excise has always...
So the 49% does not include levies?
It doesn't.
It's just
excise
VAT and excise duty?
Yes.
And then now you start now bringing in the trade licenses and the other levies at local level?
Sure.
So if you combine those, what is the cost, the percentage that goes to government?
I think that will
at whatever
vary
level,
different counties to counties, because you know that one will be based on the margins, and it will vary from even products to product.
Okay.
But for sure, it tilts. It's more than the 50% now. You'll find that from 49, you'll see the push will be higher, because different counties will charge different taxes for it and levies.
Are we seeing? I mean, we talked about this incident where 17 people were affected.
Yes.
But do we see that for all the incidents where this may have happened, that there's a direct link between this incident of, you know, health impairments, death, unfortunately, has been linked to illicit brew?
Yes.
It is.
And it has happened. Maybe let's go back a bit. If you can remember sometime back, even in 2006, 2005, 2003, there was a drink called Kumi Kumi. And Kumi Kumi was also the same thing. You find people go to illicit dens and all that. But the government of the day then came up with a solution, working with one of our members, to ensure that there is a low-cost value and beer that can be able to be sold to such people. And for us, it's very key, because so long as excise is up, you know, at the end of the day, the cost of the price will be higher. And if you look at from, for example, a consumer's point of view, you know, the share of the wallet for alcohol for a responsible consumer is, after I've paid all these other liabilities, then now this is entertainment. So so long as the cost of these other things are higher, the entertainment budget will definitely be reduced. Now, we are seeing also a very trend whereby consumers, let's say we're in the middle class, are actually choosing something that is of lower value in terms of financially. So they downtrade to, for example, the value products. Now, with that downtrading, even the government is losing revenue, because while excise tax is charged per litre, despite how high-end or low-end it is, but VAT is based on the cost of the good.
Right.
So they are downtrading. Now, unfortunately, those who are in the value product or value segment, they are actually left with no option rather than illicit. And we've seen it in the past. For example, there was a time between 2021 November to 2022 October. The government increased excise tax by 3 times differently. For example, I think for spirits it was increased by 99 shillings. For beer, spirits was 90 shillings. For wine was 45 shillings, and beer was 26 shillings. What did we see?
In one financial year?
Yes. Okay, in the government financial year, it could be 2, but in 13 months. So what did we see? We saw a dip
in
and
the
it's a
consumption
fact.
of those products.
Yes, and that's why you can find between 2018 and 2023, you find the illicit has grown by 15%, which is something of great concern to us.
Let's go back to the 2015 when Kumi Kwanambe were affecting people.
Yes.
And the government of the day said, all right, so how do we work with local formal alcoholic beverage manufacturers
Sure.
to come up with a product that serves this market? So the product that was then released to the market, what made it cheaper?
Okay. So what made it cheaper first was on excise tax incentives. As you can see, excise is the biggest cost.
Okay.
So there is a remission structure to it. Now, the other thing that also made it cheaper, it's even everything from the county levies, then not county because it was prior to 2010, but the levies were not that high. But now we are seeing a situation whereby every county is very keen on source revenue. So what does it do? Every county has a bill similar to the national government, and it's taken to certain levels where every county is trying to really raise a lot of money.
Okay.
So for our trading partners, it becomes a bit more expensive.
So back to that one.
Yes.
So excise was not front-loaded on the product.
Yes.
And then what happened to the local levies?
So for the local levies, now we've seen an increase of local levies.
Then at that point, I'm trying to understand
Yes.
why did it become cheaper?
Yes.
And why did people go to it? Because it was cheaper. So
Yes,
why
it was cheaper.
why was it cheaper? Was the production cost lower?
Yes.
Was the distribution cost lower? Was the government hand in terms of taxes lower?
So for the local levies, the cost of operating a bar was way lower compared to now.
Okay.
Because you find now, then I think we were in the era of municipalities, so definitely the cost of operating the bars were quite lower. So there was also an incentive program whereby if you are maybe a person who sells the kumi or illicit brew, you are actually incentivized, because so long as the licensing fee is lower, there is actually, nobody wants to be troubled every day with having the chiefs, the police raiding their premises. So long as that cost rate is lower, it's actually an incentive. And there are things which we are seeing actually happening. Like, for example, on the issues of counties, we've seen there even, for example, there is a bill, which is a model bill for central Kenya counties. We think for us, it will make some of the situation worse. Because, for example, so long as you're increasing the cost of legitimate trade, it will directly impact the cost of the goods. Then, because it's now not affordable, people choose illicit. And why is it making things worse? For example, they've introduced some clause. It's still a bill being debated in most counties. And some of the clauses, for example, they're saying that for alcohol distribution, you cannot distribute alcohol using border borders. It outlaws it. It actually keeps a fine of 100,000 if you distribute it using border. And it's a sad situation because imagine the number of jobs that will be lost in it. Imagine we want to go to a level where as a country we are saying e-commerce is the way to go. And even here in Nairobi, the e-commerce that we have is you buy online, you pay online, a border guy comes and delivers to you your one bottle, and you enjoy it in the confines of your home or with your friends.
What is the thinking of the drafters? Because there must be a reason for this.
Yes. The thinking of the drafters, I wouldn't say much about it because I think it would have been good if we were consulted from the word go. The thinking of the drafters is they want to end illicit alcohol.
Okay.
But where we have a different in opinion is the how.
Are the drafters made up from those who would consider themselves to be legitimate alcohol manufacturers?
So the drafters never consulted us when the bill was kept out. Of course, before the bill is drafted, there's usually a process. So I think it would have been good if we were consulted before the model bill.
But who are the drafters?
It will be, for example, there was a group from most of the county assemblies. So, because the thing is this, where we have a meeting of mind is that there is an issue.
Okay.
And we need to sort out the issue.
Okay.
That's a fact.
Okay.
Where we are having a bit of divergent view is the how.
Don't you think they are coming from somewhere where they have experience on the ground and they have seen the biggest distribution network
Yes.
of these illicits is the boda,
Sure.
because of the unregulated nature of bodas. So they're saying if you cap that, then you're making a big move. We are talking about, many. It's a bill that will go into the counties in central Kenya. That's what they see on the ground. That's what they know. They know that these illicits are distributed in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, at the back of bodas. How do you address that?
Sure. So first, I wouldn't even attribute from my own experience that the distribution of illicit a lot of it is in the back of bodas, because you can see even the quantities the bodas would carry. In some of those towns, you'll find maybe it's one, maybe a crate or two. And it helps in the last mile distribution. And if you see what they're proposing as the way of distribution in those bills, they're proposing that it should be carried in a vehicle. The vehicle needs to be branded. And these vehicles, which are believing, like, for example, for all of us who have legitimate distributors, they need to pay a sub-county license. Currently, the license and fee is paid on a county level. So if you have a county that has 6 or 7 sub-counties, you go to each and every county, and some of it is as high as 600,000, just the licensing. So you pay, now it will require you to pay about 3.6 million, which doesn't make sense. Even for a distributor, you've been given to distribute, let's say, is it in Nyeri or any other county? Then here you are now being subjected to pay this higher rate. So it is something where we look at it. They will also, because of it being branded, it's sad because the distribution might become now a target. Because you see, when a branded vehicle is moving around, at times, if they're in elements where there are criminal activities, it might become a target. There is also a view where in some of the bills they're saying that the distribution needs to happen between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We all know that buses need to operate from 5 p.m. So that is a challenge, because a lot of these buses will tend to open at maybe at 2 p.m. for the person to clean the place, to take stock. So you actually send the distribution of legitimate alcohol will start only maybe at 2 p.m. in practice, to by 6 p.m. the truck needs to have been back at the depot.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So those are key challenges, I think, that we need to seriously think through it. There are areas definitely we support. Like, for example, in the bill, it says you should not advertise alcohol near schools. We don't have a problem with that. But now,
isn't that national law already?
It's actually borrowed from the national law.
Okay.
And it's okay to have it there. But now it's also if you're saying the trucks need to be branded, and they'll be driving near schools, there'll be no 300 meters radius, they'll be driving all over the places. So what are we saying? So at times, that's why we think for us, it's good for us to be consulting each other. It has serious ramifications and impact, because we wouldn't want to have trucks all over when school-going children, it's something where we need to consider ourselves.
Okay.
Furthermore, this sector employs a lot of people. If you look at it from the farmers, the manufacturers, from the bar owners, the number of people employed, it employs about 500,000 people. So it is a sector that I think needs to be listened to. And the players and everybody is concerned about the level of illicit. And we think there are solutions, and the solution is just the existing laws you need to enforce, but you need to ensure that the parity between what is legitimate in terms of cost and what is illegitimate, there need to be a consensus. It needs to be,
Okay. Eric Githua is the chair of the Alcoholic Beverages Association of Kenya, which brings together 7 members so far. The manufacturers of legal brews in this country. We are talking about illicit brews in Kenya and why legislation could be contributing to the proliferation of illicit brews, consumption of it, and then the harm that we are seeing. 13 people died in Kagio just because they consumed this thing. Many are still hospitalized. Many may not see again. Many will have lifelong health challenges and complications. And this is just one area. Others are happening across the country on a daily basis. We must have a solution. We must have a conversation. So in the Kenyan market, according to a study that you conducted last year, 59% of what's being consumed in Kenya is illicit.
Sure.
And only 41% then becomes legitimate. Legitimate, government is getting taxes directly from it. Legitimate in terms of we can trace back the source and the origin and how it's arrived at a consumer's table or hand or mouth or throat.
Or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then we also defined illicit and said counterfeits are illicit.
Yes.
Counterfeits are Kariobangi and those things that we call Kariobangi drinks, right? Then there's contraband. Contraband could be a proper drink, but it has been brought in Okoh chini to evade tax, right?
Smuggled, yes.
Smuggled into the country.
Yes.
And then there's unregulated. Unregulated includes traditional brews.
Yes.
Somebody having some Muratina somewhere, they've made Muratina, they're kunywaing, they've followed all the process of making Muratina. You consider that illicit.
Yes.
Somebody taking busa somewhere, they've made their busa at home, they've followed all the right procedure, fermented the maize, whatever. You consider that illicit. And not all illicit is poisonous.
So, and to be honest, there is the reason why, and maybe let me speak more about the local brews, because local brews have a place in our society, our traditional ceremonies and all that. And most of these people who make local brews is actually an art, at times passed over generations. Somebody was taught by the grandfather or grandmother, and it passed down over a period of time. The only reason why it's considered to be illicit is because it's also unlawful. For example, you'll be told that for you to sell alcohol, you need to package it in a particular way. You need to have a KEBS mark. You need to have a KRA tax stamp. Tax has not been paid on it. So those are the aspects that make it illicit. And the sad bit is that at times, if you look at why at times is it still thriving, the local brew sector, and some of these people, they would probably even want to get into the legitimate space, because nobody wants to be in the Changa river dens each and every day. But if you look at the cost of compliance that has been kept by the laws that exist, it's very high. For example, there are things you'll be told today, if you want to start your own distillery or brewery, you'll be told you should have a flow meter. You'll be told there are 3 flow meters or 2 that you need to have, which are monitored. You need to have these equipments. If you look at those cost of those flow meters, they're very expensive. So you find a situation whereby, for example, before you start, the compliance items that are there will cost you about 15 million. Some extent, depending on what you produce, it could be way up at 20 million. Now, in that local village, where do we expect people to have this 15 million? But that's the cost of being the legitimate player. And the sad situation also comes once you are a legitimate player. Of course, the high excess taxes will still apply to you, which will also probably lose your customers, because your customers came there because you're affordable. So you would lose your customers to the next door vendor or the next door person who has not complied.
Okay. Sounds an awful lot like, because this den of competition is so stiff, that you'll do whatever you need to do to keep out folks who are actually, number one, making a living, number two, are actually providing an alternate source for folks who cannot afford what we are calling legitimate, because local brews have been consumed for centuries. They are part of culture.
Exactly.
They're a livelihood for very many people. I'm not even talking about the stuff that makes people blind. I'm talking about the stuff that you have at festivities in the community.
Proper murats done,
yes.
Properly done, properly. And if you want to be honest about it, the processes that they use for this distillation is the same process that the legitimate business is using today, that has been passed down to generations, but has now been formalized.
Yes.
It's the same process. So if that is the case, that we're saying it's a sad thing that they continue to, what would be the problem in saying within the context or within the boxes where this local brew is actually manufactured, can we not standardize or set requirements within that setting whereby they would be able to meet the mark 1, 2, 3? But it sounds to me that if we did that, it would be an affront to the legitimate business, because competition would still be up there.
Actually, maybe just to take you back, there are standards that are there. For example, there are KEBS standards on making changa. So for sure, by the law, and we've never had a problem. neither do we want to have a challenge with that as legitimate players, because it's part of us, it's part of traditions at the end of the day. So the only thing I think that needs to be done, and maybe some policy direction needs to be driven on, how can you be able to uplift this person? How can you drive them into the compliant world? Because so long as we have this, cost of entry being that high, for you to get into that space, the government would require you to have these items, which are also mandated by law. So long as that cost of entry is high, it's actually a barrier.
Yeah.
So for us as legitimate players, we don't mind. We actually appreciate. There are even clauses which support such. For example, you can make it, and the chief can approve for you to make it for a traditional brew. When you go to the villages, if there are traditional ceremonies, it can be made for domestic purpose or for traditional brew for that purpose, but not for commercial use. But since some of them want to get into commercial space, now they have a barrier that is there. And it's a barrier that maybe the law needs to be relooked at.
Does ABAK support traditional brews? Yes or no here?
Yes.
Okay. Does ABAK support the formalization of traditional brews?
Yes.
Does ABAK support, has ABAK had any kind of conversation or any campaign that says, we understand that part of this 59%, part of it is actually proper traditional brew, and we'd like it to come into the formal and legitimate market, and this is what we're doing to reach out to that, helping, because we have the muscle, we understand the laws, we have the know-how in terms of dealing with policy, pushing for policy that would formalize traditional brews.
Yes. So maybe just to take back, I mentioned, like, for example, the KEB standards.
Yep.
So you'd find, for example, as ABAK members, we sit down in the technical committees. You find representatives of, members from legitimate alcohol players will always be in a technical committee. So even in such forums, you find the standard exists because people who are in the technical committee were able to come up with something and say, this is a standard that makes sense. And if you look at what they are producing, you're right, some of the processes are more or less like what happens. Distillation is distillation at the end of the day. The only thing that we are seeing which is now endangering their lives is that some people are getting a bit more greedy, and now instead of using ethanol, they're using even methanol. Now, if you look at also, some of them are using ethanol but in excess format. And some of this ethanol is unfortunately being driven again by policy. So, for example, now, the other day I saw AFA, Agriculture and Food Authority, Sugar Directorate, has given a letter allowing for export of molasses. Now, what is happening? So long as you're able to export molasses from Kenya, and a lot of alcohol actually comes from the sugar cane that we get from Western Kenya. So we support a lot of farmers from that, and it's derived from molasses. But now we are finding a situation whereby Kenya Revenue Authority had come up with something, and maybe it's a government directive that come with a directive whereby if you are buying from, let's say, a local distiller, and you're buying what we call Ednah, which is made from molasses, you pay excise at that point, which I think is actually a good thing. But now it's only being applied to our members, because what people have done, you form some small distillery in Uganda, Tanzania, or any bordering country, you buy molasses there.
Right.
In that regime, it doesn't require you to pay excise at the point of selling Ednah. Then that Ednah is converted in that regime, then it's actually smuggled into the country. And there's a lot of concealment that happens at the border. I know KRA is actually trying to work on it, and it has been supportive. There are some instances where they get it, but I think it's organized crime, so it's smart. So they bring it into the country. Then once it's brought into the country, now it's used to make the counterfeit. At times, it's taken to those places where you find the jerry cans, which were to be used as in a certain case somewhere.
Yeah.
So that is the level of issues that we are finding. And correctly, back to the homebrew situation, the homebrews have been there for centuries, but we need to have a rethink. What has been happening of late to make sure that we try to stop this illicit? Because illicit is now finding itself growing, because some of those people who now saying they're making homebrews, they're probably not, they didn't perfect the art, they got too greedy, they're selling every other thing. So that is something that we find as a challenge. And maybe Kenya, we pride ourselves as a powerhouse in East Africa. I think there are things we need to learn from our neighbors. such as Tanzania.
Okay.
And if you look at it, Tanzania, for the last about 6 years, they have never increased the cost of excise on alcohol. They have never.
Okay.
And you find people don't drink illicit brews because so long as it's affordable, people opt to drink something that is legitimate. It's about choice to our people. Now, you also find that the same thing, like the other day I was looking at, Tanzania has actually gone, even on simple things like an excise stamp. They have actually reduced the cost of excise stamp. Kenya, we are still high on the cost of excise stamp. Despite the same service provider is actually the one supplying Tanzania. But here, Tanzania has reduced the excise stamp costs about a week ago by 22%. So you find all these are elements where you see the government of Tanzania is really trying to cap the issue. And for us, I think the main thing that we need to have a view and we need to just consider is so long as legitimate alcohol is affordable, people have a choice. And this choice item, you can see it even in other sectors. For example, nowadays, people go to supermarket. Sometime back, tissue, you could choose per brand.
Yeah.
Right now, somebody would say tissue is tissue. And they look at the price, whichever is lowest or on offer, take it. We've seen in other sectors where you find even bar soaps. Somebody sometime back would have a bar soap for washing clothes, would have a different one to shower with, and you'll have a different
for dishes.
For dishes. But now you find somebody buys one, and because it's a cost of things, so this one is the one. Then you cut, especially the big one. You cut it into
cut this
pieces
one for kitchen,
for that
laundry,
for laundry,
this one for bath.
Yes, and it's cheaper. So it is the same kind of thinking that is also happening in the alcohol space.
So you're saying, long and short, that if we reduce the taxes,
Yes,
the cost of alcohol will come down.
yes,
And if the cost of alcohol comes down, then the competition will be at price point,
yes,
and people will then opt to come for the branded products
exactly.
that are legitimate.
Sure.
And they will not go for the unbranded, illicit products.
Sure.
Okay.
That is the argument.
Yes.
Do you think that what we see with the roundup of businesses by police and other security agencies, whether it comes to the chief's camp, etc., do you think that is the way to go? Because what happens is that people are scared, they throw the thing on the ground when they see the truck come in. Maybe they're arrested, they're taken in, after a couple of days they're let go, but guess what? Next weekend, they're back there at the thing. So do you think that that is a way to solve the problem?
Okay. It's not a sustainable way. Because, for example, maybe I can, for the last 6 months, as ABAK, we've had various engagement within the counties with the law enforcement agencies, particularly in Eastern region and Central Kenya region. And, we go meet and agree on what are the sustainable solutions. So doing what they call the raids is not sustainable. And it has reached to a level where some people even know these people will just do it today. Then in 2 weeks, BAU, business as usual. So what does that person do? They just close down for that 2 weeks. And then when they hit, reduces. And the difference, actually, the high tax rate is actually, unfortunately, an incentive to do illicit. Because if you look at it this way, for ABAK members, some of our products are retailing at about 250 shillings, so thereabout. And I'm talking about the 250 ml Mwananchi spirit, which is retailing at about that amount of money. But on the other side, you look at consumers are having access to something which is being sold at 100 shillings. Now, we know, and from what I told you, if 49% of the RRP is just excise and VAT, it is impossible to make it. In fact, for us, we are quite clear, even it is impossible to make alcohol and do anything if you don't sell it if you find something that is being sold at less than 185 shillings. And some of us, have economies of scale, so it should be cheaper for us. But for sure, it is impossible to make it. But we find it there in the market. So, and there's always that trend when enforcement is enhanced, they go under a bit for some period of time, then they come back again. So for us, it's how do you bridge that gap? Let's learn from our neighbors, Uganda. Let's learn from Tanzania and see how can we be able to ensure that gap is not too high so that people cannot be incentivized to get into illicit. But so long as it's high, 49% people will think through it on how to, yes.
It can't just be tax. There must be something else that drives people to consuming these other products. It's not a new conversation that we're having in 2024. It wasn't even new in 2014 or 2004. It's been a conversation that's been there for a long time. The issue of then proliferation of drinking dens, alcoholism, just talk about Mount Kenya, is a decades-long issue. But ABAK just keeps talking about the prices and the taxes. Do you have another approach to this?
Okay. So,
because surely people are going to look for alcoholic beverages. And there are very many other considerations, price being among them. But what else?
So the thing is this, people go to drink first. Let's understand they're thinking of the consumer. So the consumer will go to a bar to have a drink first because human beings, we are social beings. Then the second bit, probability is high. A lot of business is actually discussed in that place. The same way you find people go to upmarket, people will find themselves going to golf club to discuss business. These people, if you are a plumber today and you set out yourself in a new town, probably when you go there, that's when people will know you and you get some jobs out of it. So the socialization aspect would always continue. Now, why are we very key at price? Because everybody, even at this moment, people are very price sensitive. Because price is key. Everybody wants to, ensure that they are able to cut a bit of their costs in order to supplement other things. And a lot of things you said price, because I said when it comes from the share of the wallet, entertainment is usually towards the end. So you paid your school fees, you've paid all other expenses, then entertainment is towards the end. And we've seen situations whereby if legitimate alcohol is affordable, people actually jump in. I can give you an example. You'll find you got yourself maybe to a rural area. When yourself, Latiff, you're there, when you've come from Nairobi, the same guy who drinks what is illicit would actually be aspiring for you to buy him something legitimate. All these people have aspirations. You aspire to have this brand, which is a legitimate brand, but because of your wish, you can't be there. And some of them even fell from the legitimate brands because of circumstances, economic circumstances, to what we consider illicit. So that's why price and tax is key to make us go to that level. Also from a county government perspective, I think it's very key to ensure that there are discussions to ensure that these barriers are not there. If the same people who are selling these considered illicit items are actually having an easier way to come to legitimate world, it's better.
I want to take you back. I told you in the three definitions, counterfeit, contraband, and regulated, not all of them are poisonous.
Yes.
It's not all drinks that are cheap that are poisonous. But it sounds to me that ABAK wants to frame this conversation that if it's cheap,
it's illicit.
It's illicit. If it's illicit, you're likely going to die. And that's why I'm asking. I mean, it cannot be that.
So the thinking is this.
What else? I mean, not all drinks that are costing less than 100 shillings are likely to kill you.
What happens is this. First, the government authorities are there to ascertain that the product and the processes are followed. So, for example, if you have something that today KEBS has not approved it, for our factories, KEBS comes to, ascertain the process, there are quality checks that are done. Even for us as an industry or for people in this trade, we are not so sure about it. You would find at times, for example, somebody is using the smuggled ethanol. We are not sure. And if you look at those people that are using it, how can they even differentiate a methanol and ethanol? Because you'd find most of these people who are actually brewing and selling it, some of them even have good intentions because they are people from the same village. They didn't know this will kill people. But for factories like us, we have quality processes. We have, KEBS is there to check you're using ethanol, not methanol. If you look at methanol and ethanol, they're all clear liquids. How do you differentiate? So you find that aspect of the fact that the government authorities have not been at play in that area, and that's why they're considered illicit. That is what now makes at times people might be, either through the will of the person who is selling it or without the person selling it knowing, might be disposed to having something that has health issues. So that's where we come from.
Okay. What percentage of this 59% illicit is actually contraband?
Contraband is, I can check, I think 16%. Yeah.
16%.
So contraband is just tax evaded. So a lot of it is counterfeit. And then the other bit is now, of course, the home brews.
So you could see a 16% actually going to the other side if they were tax compliant.
Yes.
They could become legitimate.
Most of the contraband we see in this country, it's actually imported whiskeys, it could be imported spirits.
But if those folks
Yes.
who are under that brand then
Yes.
become a part of ABAK,
Yes.
then they would be on the legitimate side.
You become
essentially.
legitimate, yes.
Are there some members, not maybe members of ABAK, are there some formal manufacturers of alcoholic beverages who also put some of their product through the contraband route?
That would be
legitimate
very
route?
hard to tell, because a lot of contraband we've seen from our research is actually maybe distributors, somebody who is importing it into the country. Most of the local manufacturers tend to have their own brand. So a lot of it you find it's imported product that comes into it. The other bit that you find might be a bit on tax evaded. And how do we know about it? From the pricing point of view. Where if you find something that is being sold at that little amount, for sure it means taxes have never been paid. Because if you go to a bar and find something being sold at 100, and for us we know for sure the tax in it, for example, for a 250 ml spirit, excise alone is about 89 shillings, sorry. You add excise and the cost of the tax stamp, that's 89 shillings. And we've not talked about VAT. So that pricing is actually a big indicator to us that could be happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
These conversations need to continue happening, and we thank you very much, Eric, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Eric Githua is the chair of the Alcoholic Beverages Association of Kenya. We'll be talking about the alcoholic sector and the call by this association for wider involvement of stakeholders in drafting policy, laws and regulations at national county level. Asante sana for joining us.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.